"Who is the woman?" asked the mafia boss when he saw the single mother dining alone in his restaurant. The check for the electric bill felt paper-thin and dangerous in Olivia Monroe's pocket. $64.30. It was the exact amount she had saved, coin by coin, to keep the lights on in their tiny fourth-floor apartment, and she was about to spend all of it on pasta. She looked at her son, Jamie, who was walking beside her, his small hand tucked firmly in hers. He was 6 years old today. 6. The number felt like a milestone and a judgment. 6 years she had kept him safe, fed, and sheltered, all by herself. 6 years of running, of looking over her shoulder, of existing in the margins of Crestwood. Jamie, oblivious to the weight of the $64, was vibrating with an excitement that was almost painful for her to watch. It was a pure, uncomplicated joy she felt she had lost the right to. "Are we really going, Mom, to the fancy place?" he whispered, his eyes wide as they approached the restaurant. Olivia forced a smile, her heart doing a familiar, anxious squeeze. "We're really going, honey. Happy birthday." It was called Vesuvio's. She had heard 2 mothers at the park talking about it. "It's so quiet," one had said, "and safe. You never see any trouble there." Safe. That was the word that had lodged in her brain. She lived her life in pursuit of that single, elusive concept. She had no idea that in Crestwood, safe often meant protected, and protected meant owned. She pushed open the heavy oak door, and a wave of warm air, smelling of garlic, wine, and old money, washed over them. The restaurant was dark, intimate, and clearly terrifyingly expensive. A host in a stiff tuxedo looked down his nose at her worn coat and Jamie's slightly too small sneakers. "A table for 2, please," Olivia said, her voice barely a whisper, hoping he couldn't hear the tremor in it. The host paused, his eyes flicking from her to the reservation book, as if he knew she wouldn't be in it. But he finally nodded, perhaps deciding they were too pathetic to be a threat. "This way." He led them to a small table in the corner, blessedly tucked away. Olivia slid into the booth, her senses overwhelmed. The cutlery was heavy, the napkins were linen, not paper. She felt like a stray dog that had wandered into a palace. She clutched her worn handbag in her lap, the electric bill a hard, square reminder of her transgression. "Wow," Jamie breathed, looking at the flickering candle on the table. "Wow," she agreed, trying to match his tone. She opened the menu and her stomach dropped. The prices were astronomical. There was nothing, not even a side salad, she could afford without dipping into next week's grocery money. From the private mezzanine, a section of the restaurant elevated above the main floor and shielded by dark wood and one-way glass. Dominic Romano watched her walk in. He did not often dine in the main room of his own restaurant. He preferred the quiet and privacy of the mezzanine, where he could conduct business over plates of pasta that were, by his own admission, the best in the city. He owned this building and the one next to it, and the import-export business that used the docks, and, according to a few ambitious district attorneys, the entire Crestwood City Council. He was discussing a shipping delay with his head of security, Marco, a man built of solid, unflappable loyalty. "The container is held up in customs," Marco was saying. "They're claiming a random inspection." Dominic held up a hand, silencing him. His gaze was fixed on the floor below, on the woman and the little boy. He watched the host lead them to table 7. He watched the woman slide into the booth, her shoulders slumped with a weariness that went bone deep. She was beautiful, but not in the polished, high-maintenance way of the women who usually frequented his establishment. Her beauty was accidental, forgotten. Her chestnut-colored hair was pulled back in a simple, frayed knot, and her face, pale and fine-boned, was dominated by large, anxious eyes. "Boss?" Marco asked, confused by the sudden silence. Dominic leaned forward, his elbows resting on the table, his eyes never leaving the woman. He watched her open the menu and saw the subtle, panicked stiffening of her spine. "Who is the woman?" Dominic asked. His voice was a low, gravelly rumble, a voice used to giving commands and never having to repeat them. Marco followed his gaze. He saw nothing of importance. A woman, poorly dressed, a kid. "Nobody, boss," Marco replied, dismissive. "Just a local. Looks like she's struggling. Surprised Leo even let her in." Dominic said nothing. He watched. Olivia's hands were shaking as she tried to do the math. She could order the cheapest pasta on the menu, the aglio e olio, and a single glass of water. They could share. It would cost $48, before tax and tip. It was madness. But the look on Jamie's face. "What are you gonna get, Mom?" Jamie asked, swinging his feet, which did not quite reach the floor. I think we'll share the spaghetti. Honey, I hear the portions are huge here. It'll be a surprise." "Like a giant pasta mountain?" Jamie's eyes lit up. "Exactly." She signaled for the waiter, her heart hammering. Dominic watched the entire exchange. He saw her anxiety, her forced smile, the way she gave her son the larger share of the water. He watched her calculate the tip on her fingers, her brow furrowed. He was a man who understood transactions. Everything in his life was a trade, money for power, loyalty for protection, violence for control. This, however, was something different. It was pure. There was no angle. Just a mother, trying to give her son a single good night. He watched as they ate, the woman taking only a few bites, pushing the rest of the pasta toward the boy, encouraging him to fuel up. When they were finished, Dominic saw the woman reach into her cheap handbag and pull out a small, slightly squashed cupcake from a plastic sandwich bag. His chest, a place he thought had been hollowed out and reinforced with steel years ago, felt a strange, unfamiliar ache. She dug in her bag again and produced a single, thin birthday candle and a small box of matches. Her hands trembled as she struck one. The flame flared, illuminating her face, and for a second, she looked almost peaceful. She stuck the candle in the cupcake and pushed it toward her son. "Make a wish, Jamie," she whispered. Dominic leaned forward, as if he could hear her from across the room. The boy closed his eyes tight, his face screwed up in concentration, and then he blew. The tiny flame vanished. The woman clapped, a small, soundless gesture. Dominic motioned to Sophia, the older waitress who had been serving his section for 15 years. She appeared at his elbow instantly. "Sophia, table 7, he said, nodding toward them. "Mr. Romano." "Their bill is covered. Send them the Vesuvio's volcano, the chocolate lava cake, on the house. Tell them it's for the boy's birthday." Sophia, a woman who had seen politicians and police captains fawn over Dominic, was surprised. He never involved himself with the main floor. Of course, "Mr. Romano, and if the woman asks who paid?" Dominic looked back at the table. The woman was laughing, a genuine, unguarded laugh, as her son told a story. It transformed her face, erasing the exhaustion for a fleeting second. "Tell her someone handled it," he said. "That's all." A few minutes later, Olivia was shocked when a waiter placed an elaborate dessert in front of Jamie, a rich chocolate cake, erupting with warm fudge, with a scoop of vanilla ice cream melting beside it. "Oh, no," Olivia said, her hands flying up. "There's a mistake. We didn't order this." The waiter, a kind-eyed man who had been briefed by Sophia, smiled warmly. "There's no mistake, ma'am. Compliments of the house for the young man's birthday." Jamie looked like he had just seen magic. "For me?" "For you," the waiter confirmed. Olivia was deeply suspicious. Nothing in her life was free. Kind gestures always came with strings, sharp ones that cut deep, but Jamie was already digging in, his face smeared with chocolate, and she couldn't bring herself to ruin it. She relaxed. Just a fraction. When Jamie had scraped the plate clean, Olivia flagged the waiter down, her anxiety returning full force. "The check, please." "One moment." He returned a minute later, empty-handed. "Ma'am, your bill has been taken care of." The warmth in the room vanished. Olivia felt a cold dread wash over her. What do you mean? By who? I don't understand. I'm sorry, ma'am, the waiter said, his expression firm but polite. I was just told that someone handled it. Please, enjoy the rest of your evening. This was worse than the dessert. This was not kindness. This was a message. This was ownership. She felt watched, exposed. Someone had seen her poverty, and paid for her meal like she was a charity case, or worse, like they were buying something. Her past with Trevor had taught her that men who gave gifts expected payment. No, she said, her voice shaking. She fumbled in her purse, pulling out the crumpled $64. Please, I have to pay. Who was it? I'm truly sorry. I don't have that information. Olivia felt sick. She threw the cash onto the table, far more than the meal was worth, but she didn't care. Take it, please. She grabbed Jamie's hand. Come on, honey, we have to go. Now. But Mom. Now, Jamie. She half dragged him out of the restaurant, ignoring the host's confused look. She burst out onto the cold street, her heart pounding a frantic rhythm against her ribs. From the mezzanine, Dominic watched her flee. He saw the cash she had left, a desperate, proud gesture that cost her more than he could imagine. He watched her pull her son close and hurry down the street, disappearing into the dark. Marco, Dominic said, his voice dangerously quiet. Boss, have Sal get the car, follow her. From a distance, I want to know she gets home safe. Marco raised an eyebrow. This was highly unusual. You want us to tail her? I want her protected, Dominic corrected him. Not harassed. Don't engage. Just see her home. The walk from Vesuvio's to their apartment in the Warren district was 20 minutes. 20 minutes of dark streets, shuttered storefronts, and the lingering smell of stale beer and desperation. Olivia couldn't afford a cab. Not after leaving all her money at the restaurant. The loss of the electric bill money made her want to weep. But she couldn't. Not in front of Jamie. Why were you so mad, Mom? Jamie asked, his little legs struggling to keep up. I'm not mad, sweetie. I don't like surprises. I like the surprise, Jamie said. That was the best cake ever. She squeezed his hand, a knot of guilt and fear tightening in her throat. She had exposed him. She had taken him somewhere they didn't belong, and now someone had their eye on her. They turned onto her street, a notoriously rough block. Even the streetlights seemed to have given up, casting weak, yellow pools in the gloom. Two men stumbled out of a boarded-up bodega, their silhouettes backlit by the flickering neon of a liquor store sign. They were drunk, loud, and they saw her immediately. Well, well, one of them slurred, stepping into her path. Look what we got here, a pretty little mama, all alone with her boy. Olivia's blood turned to ice. This was her nightmare. This was the echo of Trevor. She yanked Jamie behind her, her body shielding him. Leave us alone, she said, trying to sound firm, but her voice was a thin, reedy thing. Please. Come on, lady, don't be like that. The second man laughed, a harsh, barking sound. He took a step closer, close enough for her to smell the cheap whiskey on his breath. We just want to talk. Maybe you can buy us a drink. Since you're coming from Vesuvio's, you're high class, right? One of them had been watching. The dread intensified. He reached out, his hand grasping for her arm. Olivia flinched, pulling Jamie back, but there was nowhere to go. Headlights sliced the darkness, so bright they were blinding. A sleek, black sedan, impossibly clean, impossibly silent, glided to the curb. It hadn't just arrived. It had materialized, a shark rising from the depths. The two men froze. This was not a police car. This was something else, something that carried a different kind of authority in this neighborhood. The car's presence was an immediate, unspoken threat. The passenger window hummed down, revealing a man in a driver's cap. He was older, with a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He just looked at the two drunks. He didn't speak. He didn't move. He just stared. The effect was instantaneous. The drunk's bravado evaporated. Sorry, the first one mumbled, raising his hands. "Our mistake. We were just leaving. No trouble." They scrambled away, practically falling over each other as they disappeared into a dark alley. Olivia was shaking so hard she could barely stand. She clutched Jamie to her chest, his face buried in her coat. The driver, the man in the cap, turned his gaze to her. His expression was not unkind, but it was not friendly either. It was neutral, professional. He gave a small, respectful tip of his hat. Then the window glided up, and the car pulled away from the curb, its engine a low purr that was swallowed by the night. Olivia stood there for a full minute, her heart trying to escape her chest, the restaurant, the paid bill. Now this, a black car, appearing from nowhere, to save her. She didn't connect the events. She couldn't. Her mind refused to draw a line between a mysteriously paid dinner and a guardian angel in a luxury sedan. It was too much. It was too strange. She grabbed Jamie. "Run!" she gasped, and she did not stop running until she was inside her apartment, the door locked, the chain slid across, and a kitchen chair wedged under the knob for good measure. She sank to the floor, her back against the door, and finally, in the dark of her own safe place, she let the tears come. 3 days later, Dominic Romano sat in his home office. The room was vast, paneled in dark mahogany, the silence broken only by the quiet click of a mouse. He was not reviewing shipping manifests or financial reports. He was watching surveillance footage from Vesuvio's, from 3 nights ago. On a massive wall-mounted screen, he had isolated the feed from table 7. He zoomed in on Olivia's face. He watched her talk to her son, her expression soft and unguarded. He watched her eyes scan the room, the anxiety in them so palpable he could almost feel it. He watched her smile when the boy spoke, the way her hand rested protectively on his shoulder. He was fixated. He rewound the footage. He watched her pull the single cupcake from her bag. He watched her strike the match, the tiny flame reflecting in her eyes. He watched her son blow out the candle, and he watched her small, quiet celebration. He rewound it and watched it again. Marco entered the office, holding a manila file. He stood silently until Dominic finally paused the footage, freezing the frame on Olivia's face. "You have the report," Dominic stated. It was not a question. "We do," Marco confirmed, opening the file. "Her name is Olivia Monroe, age 28. The boy is James Monroe. Jamie, 6 years old, no father listed on the birth certificate." Dominic's gaze hardened. He turned from the screen to face his security chief. "She works 2 jobs," Marco continued, his voice flat. "Just to cover the basics. Cleans offices at the Crestwood Tower downtown, from midnight until 6 in the morning. Then she waitresses at the Blue Plate Diner on 11th Street, from 8 a.m. until 2 p.m. Dominic processed this, midnight to 6, then 8 to 2, 16 hours of work, with a 2-hour gap. He imagined her, exhausted, sleeping on a bus or in a break room. "She's barely making rent," Marco said. "The apartment is a walk-up in the Warren. The building's a slum." "The ex," Dominic said, his voice void of emotion. "Trevor Hayes, a real piece of work. Boss. Petty theft, aggravated assault, a long list of misdemeanors. She got a restraining order against him 2 years ago. He violated it twice. Did 6 months in county, got out 3 months ago." "Where is he now?" "Vanished, off the grid, probably laying low, for now." "And the son, the custody." "She has full custody, but it's shaky. Hayes' family filed a complaint with Child Protective Services last year, claimed unstable environment because of her finances and the neighborhood. The case is technically open but dormant. She's on their radar. One wrong move, one neighbor complaint, and they could take the boy." Dominic was silent for a long time. He stood and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window that overlooked the glittering, dark city he controlled. He thought of her, lighting that single candle, sharing one meal. He thought of her walking home through the Warren, of the fear in her eyes when she fled his restaurant. He thought of the monster in her past and the bureaucratic wolves at her door. All that, and she still had the pride to throw down her last $64 to pay a bill she didn't owe. He turned back to Marco. The diner on 11th. Boss? The blue plate. What's the coffee like? Marco blinked, a glimmer of understanding dawning in his eyes. I'm not sure, boss. I imagine it's cheap. We'll find out, Dominic said, walking to his desk. Tomorrow morning, 8:15. Understood. Marco paused. And the surveillance? Make it permanent. Dominic ordered. 2 men, a different car. They are to be shadows. She's not to be harassed. She's not to be spooked. She's to be protected. I want to know every street she walks on, and I want to know who is on it. And the ex, Hayes, if he shows up? Dominic looked up, his eyes as cold and clear as winter. If he shows up, Dominic said, I want to know before he even breathes the same air she does. The Blue Plate Diner was an assault of fluorescent light and the smell of stale coffee and burnt bacon. It was the polar opposite of Vesuvio's, a world of chipped formica countertops and watery ketchup bottles, where the only music was the clatter of heavy ceramic plates and the sizzle of the flat-top grill. And it was, for 6 hours a day, Olivia's world. 4 days after the incident at Vesuvio's, Dominic Romano walked into the Blue Plate Diner at 8:15 in the morning. He was alone, having instructed Marco to wait in the car. He wore a dark gray suit, so finely tailored it seemed to absorb the weak morning light. Every head in the diner turned. People did not wear suits like that in this part of town. They looked at him, then at his shoes, which cost more than the rent on the apartments above the diner, and then they looked quickly back at their eggs. Olivia was at the coffee station, her back to the door, her hands working with the quick, repetitive motions of someone running on muscle memory and sheer will. She had managed, barely, to cover the electric bill by pawning the last thing she owned of any value, a thin gold locket her grandmother had left her. The $64 she had thrown on the table at Vesuvio's had cost her the last piece of her past. Table for one, Dominic said to the hostess, a teenager chewing gum. The girl's eyes went wide. Sure. Booth or counter? Booth, please. His voice was a quiet rumble that cut through the diner's clatter. He was seated at the table 4, in the center of the room. Olivia picked up a full pot of coffee, her mind on the neighbor who was watching Jamie, and turned. She saw him, and she froze. She did not recognize him as the owner of Vesuvio's. She had never seen him that night. She only saw a man who radiated an intensity that did not belong here. He was watching her, his gaze level and unreadable. He looked dangerous. He looked like the kind of man who ate places like this for breakfast. She forced her feet to move. She had 2 other tables waiting, but he was in her section. She approached his table, her notepad in her hand like a shield. Morning. Can I get you some coffee? Please, Dominic said. She poured the coffee. It was thin and acidic. She watched his hand as he picked up the mug. His fingers were long, his nails clean. A heavy gold signet ring sat on his right pinky. It was the only piece of jewelry he wore, and it looked more real than anything else in the room. Do you know what you'd like? She asked, her voice clipped. Professional. Just the coffee is fine. Thank you. He did not open the plastic-coated menu. He just sat there and watched her. Olivia felt the heat of his gaze on her back as she moved to her other tables, refilling coffees, delivering plates of eggs. He was not leering, it was not sexual, not in the way she was used to, the cheap, appraising looks of truckers and construction workers. It was something else. It was analytic, possessive. It made her skin crawl. He sat for 20 minutes. He took 2 sips of the terrible coffee. Finally, he placed a bill on the table and stood. He walked out, the small bell above the door jingling his exit. Olivia went to clear the mug. On the table, beneath the cup, was a $20 bill for a $1 coffee. A cold dread, familiar from Vesuvio's, washed over her. She snatched the bill and ran to the door. He was just stepping into the black sedan, the same one she recognized from the other night. Marco, in the driver's seat, saw her and his face remained impassive. "Sir," Olivia called out, pushing the door open, "you forgot your change." Dominic turned, his hand on the car door. He looked at her, then at the $20 bill in her hand. "No, I didn't," he said. His voice was not kind, but it was not cruel. It was absolute. He got in the car, and it pulled silently away from the curb. He came back the next day, 8:15, same booth, same order, just coffee. And the day after that, the other waitresses, Sharon and Dottie, were buzzing. "Who is he?" Sharon whispered, fanning herself with an order pad. "He looks like a movie star, a rich, scary one, and he tips like a king. He's in your section, Liv. Go talk to him," Dottie urged. "Find out if he's single or breathing." But Olivia avoided him. She traded tables with Sharon, claiming she felt sick. She could not explain why the man's quiet presence and his 2 large tips felt like a threat. It felt like being marked. For a week, she worked the closing shift at the office cleaning job, midnight until 6 in the morning, her body aching from the repetitive motions of emptying trash cans and vacuuming endless floors. Then she would take the bus to the diner, her nerves strung tight, wondering if the man in the suit would be there. One evening, nearly 2 weeks after the night at Vesuvio's, she was walking home from the bus stop after her cleaning shift. It was just after 6:30 in the morning, the sky a bruised purple, the air cold and damp. She was bone-tired, a weariness so deep it felt like a sickness. A different car, a dark Mercedes this time, pulled up beside her. The window hummed down, and he was there, in the driver's seat. He was driving himself. Olivia's heart leaped into her throat. She took a step back. "Miss Monroe," he said. She froze. He knew her name. The blood drained from her face. This was not a coincidence. This was not a man who just liked bad coffee. "How do you know my name?" she whispered, her hand instinctively gripping the strap of her bag. "You look tired," he said, ignoring her question. "It's a cold morning. Get in. I'll take you home." "No," she said, her voice sharp with panic. "No, thank you. I'm fine." She turned and began walking, fast, her worn sneakers pounding the cracked pavement. The car moved with her, cruising at her pace, a silent, metal predator. "The streets aren't safe this early. Olivia, let me drive you." The use of her first name, so intimate and casual, terrified her. "Leave me alone. I don't want to ride. I don't want your money. Just leave me alone." Dominic stopped the car. He did not raise his voice. He did not get out. He simply watched her hurry away, her small, defiant figure rigid with fear. He let her get half a block ahead before he spoke again, his voice carrying easily in the quiet morning. "I am not the one you should be afraid of." She stopped but didn't look back. He pulled a business card from his visor. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock, impossibly heavy. "My name is Dominic," he said. He held the card out the window. "Take this. If you ever feel unsafe, use this number." She wanted to run, but she knew, with a primal certainty, that he would not leave until she took the card. She walked back slowly, her body trembling, snatched the card from his fingers, careful not to touch his hand, and backed away. "Good morning, Olivia," he said. The window slid up, and the car drove off, leaving her standing in the exhaust-scented air. She ran the rest of the way home, burst into her apartment and locked the door, leaning against it as she gasped for breath. Jamie was still asleep in his small bed in the corner of the living room. She looked at the card. It was blank, except for a name, Dominic, and a 10-digit phone number. No title, no company. It felt heavy in her hand, like a stone. She marched to the kitchen and threw it into the small trash bin under the sink. She buried it beneath coffee grounds and an empty egg carton. She would not be bought. She would not be intimidated. A few minutes later, while she was in the shower, the hot water barely washing away the chill of her fear, a small hand reached into the trash. Jamie, woken by her frantic entry, had watched her from his bed. He did not know what the card meant, but he knew his mother was scared, and he had seen the man in the car. He had a vague memory of the man's voice, deep and calm. He retrieved the card, wiped the coffee grounds off on his pajama bottoms, and hid it in the small shoebox under his bed where he kept his superhero figures and his favorite, shiniest rocks. The confrontation Olivia had been dreading for 2 years happened on a Tuesday. She had picked Jamie up from his after-school program, and they were walking to the small, overpriced corner grocery to buy milk. And then, "Mom, Liam said his dad is a fireman, but I told him my mom is a super cleaner, and she fights germs all night," Jamie was saying, swinging her hand. Olivia smiled, a genuine, tired smile. "Is that right? Am I a superhero?" "Yeah, you're germ buster." She laughed, and for a second, the weight lifted. Well, Liv. Still telling fairy tales, I see." The voice hit her like a physical blow. She stopped dead. The smile vanished, her face turning to an icy mask of terror. Jamie, sensing the change, pressed against her leg. A man was leaning against the grocery store's brick wall, smoking a cigarette. He was thin, with a weasel-like face and nervous, darting eyes. His name was Weasel, and he had been Trevor's right-hand man, the one who held the keys and collected the debts. "Leave us alone, Weasel," Olivia said, her voice low and shaking. She pulled Jamie behind her. "Can't do that, Liv," he said, taking a drag, his eyes flickering to Jamie. "Trevor's been asking about you. He's nostalgic, wants to see his boy." "He's not his boy," Olivia hissed, "and you're violating a restraining order by even talking to me." Weasel laughed, a dry, wheezing sound. "Restraining order? That's cute. Trevor's got bigger problems, and so do you. See, he left town in a hurry, left a lot of debt, and the people he owes, they think you might know where he is. Or maybe you can help pay his tab." "I don't have any money. I don't know where he is. Now get out of our way." She tried to push past him, but he blocked her path, stepping in front of her. He was close enough now that she could smell the sour odor on him. "I heard you're doing real well, though," Weasel sneered, his eyes narrowing. "Eating at places like Vesuvio's? Got a rich boyfriend now. Liv, holding out on your old friends?" The blood left her face. Vesuvio's. How did he know? He saw her panic and smiled. "Yeah, word gets around. Trevor wants his cut, or he wants the kid. You choose." He reached out and grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her bicep. "No!" Olivia cried, trying to yank her arm free. Jamie, seeing the man grab his mother, let out a terrified wail. "Leave my mommy alone," he screamed, bursting into tears. The sound of Jamie's cry broke Weasel's focus. He glanced down at the sobbing child, annoyed. "Shut that kid up, Liv!" From a gray sedan parked across the street, 2 of Dominic's men watched the entire exchange. One of them was filming it on his phone, the lens zoomed in on Weasel's hand on Olivia's arm. Boss said not to engage. The driver, a man named Paulie, muttered, "We're not engaging," the other man, Tony, replied, his thumb tapping the send button. "We're just reporting." Weasel gave Olivia's arm a final, vicious shake. "You've got 24 hours to come up with $500, or I'm coming back for the boy." He let her go, shoving her backward, and sauntered down the street, disappearing around the corner. Olivia collapsed against the wall, pulling Jamie into her chest. He was hysterical, his small body shaking. She was shaking, too, so violently she could barely stand. She was trapped. She filed a report at the 19th precinct, Jamie sitting beside her, drawing shaky circles on a piece of paper. The desk sergeant, a man with a tired, jaded face, listened to her story, his pen scratching slowly. "Weasel," he repeated. "Real name?" I don't know. He's an associate of Trevor Hayes." The sergeant sighed, a long, deep sigh that smelled of stale coffee. He knew the name. "Miss Monroe," he said, leaning forward, "I'm going to file this, but you need to understand something. You've got a flag on your file from CPS, a big one." "I know, but he threatened my son." "You," the officer interrupted, his voice dropping. "Keep attracting this element. You're bringing men like Hayes and this Weasel. Around your kid. You're living in a bad neighborhood. You're working 2 jobs. So who's watching him? You're on thin ice. Ma'am, one more report like this, one more incident, and CPS isn't going to see you as a victim. They're going to see you as an unstable environment. They're going to take your son. Olivia stared at him, the color draining from her face. The one place she was supposed to go for help was threatening her. Are you saying I shouldn't have come here? I'm saying, the officer said, closing his notebook, that you need to get your life in order. Fast. Dominic Romano watched the video on his phone. He watched it 3 times. The first time, he watched Weasel. The second, he watched Olivia, her face pale with terror. The third time, he watched Jamie, and he listened to the sound of the boy's terrified scream. His face was made of stone. Boss, Marco said, standing beside him in the office. We also got the report from the precinct. The desk sergeant as good as told her not to call them again. Dominic set the phone down on his mahogany desk. He looked at Marco. He touched her. Yes, boss. He made the boy cry. Yes, boss. Find him, Dominic said, his voice a low, cold vibration. Find him and warn him off, permanently. Marco and 3 other men found Weasel that night, drinking his $500 in advance at a dive bar in the Warren. They waited until he stumbled into the alley to relieve himself. They did not use weapons. They did not make a sound. Marco simply blocked the alley's exit. Weasel turned, his drunken confidence vanishing when he saw the 4 shadows surrounding him. The woman, Marco said. His voice was calm, conversational. Olivia Monroe and her son. You will forget their names. You will forget their faces. I don't know what you're talking about, Weasel stammered. You will crawl back to Trevor Hayes, Marco continued, as if Weasel hadn't spoken. And you will deliver a message if he or any animal associated with him comes within a 1-mile radius of her or the boy. We will begin to dissolve his assets, starting with his kneecaps. Am I clear? Weasel, his entire body shaking, nodded frantically. Good, Marco said. He took a step back, and Tony, the largest of the men, stepped forward. Tony cracked his knuckles. This is just so you don't forget the message. It was over in 30 seconds. They left Weasel whimpering on the wet pavement, his nose broken and 2 of his ribs cracked. It was a warning, delivered in the only language his kind understood. The next day, Olivia went to work at the diner, her body moving on autopilot, her mind screaming. She had to get out. She needed money. She needed to run. But where? She was clumsy, distracted. She dropped a full tray of coffee, the ceramic shattering on the floor. Her boss, Sal, pulled her aside, his face pale and sweating. Olivia, I can't. I'm sorry. What, Sal? I'll clean it up. It's not the coffee. Liv, a man came in here yesterday. A scary guy, asked about you, asked if you were working. He said he was an old friend. My wife, Maria. She's terrified. She doesn't want that kind of trouble out here. It was Weasel. He had come here. Sal, please, she begged. I need this job. He won't come back. I promise. I can't risk it. Olivia, I've got my own kids. Here's your pay for the week. I'm sorry, I have to let you go. She stood on the sidewalk, the crumpled cash in her hand, her diner apron clutched in her fist. She had lost her job, the one safe job she had, all because of Trevor, all because of Weasel. She had no money, no locket left to pawn, and a man was coming to take her son. She walked home in a daze, tears blurring the gritty cityscape. She was standing at the bus stop, not even sure where she would go, when he pulled up. The Mercedes. Dominic. He was waiting for her. He had known. He got out of the car and stood in front of her. He was not smiling. He came to your diner. Dominic said it was a statement. Olivia just stared at him, her body numb with defeat. They fired me. I know. How do you know everything? She whispered, her last bit of fight crumbling. Are you one of them? One of Trevor's people? He almost laughed, but the sound was cold. I heard you lost your position. I'm sorry. Sal is a weak man. He's a scared man, she corrected him. Just like I am. I have an opening, Dominic said, gesturing to a sleek, black glass building 2 blocks down. A club. The Onyx Room. I need a hostess. The hours are 6 to 10 in the evening. It pays well. You'd be home by 10:30. She recoiled. A club? No, I can't. I have a son. It's a jazz club. Olivia, not a strip joint. It's quiet. Businessmen, politicians. It's safe. There was that word again. Safe. I can't work for you, she said, shaking her head. I don't know who you are. I don't want your money. Who do you think you'd be working for? He asked, his voice reasonable. The club manager's name is Arthur. He signs the paychecks. My name is nowhere on the books. Oh, no one will know who hired you. You can quit any time. No questions asked. I'm not offering you a cage. Olivia, I'm offering you a paycheck. She looked at him, at his expensive suit, his calm, powerful face. He was the man from the diner, the man from the car, the man who had paid her bill at Vesuvio's, the man who had appeared the night the drunks bothered her. It was all him. He was the one who had been watching her. Why? She asked, her voice cracking. Why are you doing this? Dominic held her gaze. I'm offering you a job. Miss Monroe, do you want it? She thought of Jamie. She thought of Weasel's threat. She thought of the empty pantry and the rent check that was due in 3 days. She had no choice. Yes, she whispered, her voice heavy with resignation. Okay. The Onyx Room was unlike any place she had ever been. It was dark, plush, and smelled of expensive liquor and old wood. The music was a live jazz trio, the sound a low, smooth thrum that soothed her raw nerves. Her job was simple: smile, check reservations, and lead people to their tables. She was good at it. The quiet, reserved dignity that made her stand out at the diner made her fit in perfectly here. Dominic was there most nights, in a private booth in the back, identical to the one at Vesuvio's. He never spoke to her at work. He never signaled her over. He just watched. The first time he offered her a ride home from the club, she accepted. It was past 10 at night, and the walk to the bus stop was dark. The rides were quiet, charged with an unspoken tension. He would ask about Jamie. How is he? He's good, she said, surprised. He learned to tie his shoes today. That's a big day for a man, Dominic said, his voice serious. She found herself smiling. I guess it is. A week into the new job, he drove her home and walked her to her apartment door. She was fumbling for her keys, her body slumped with exhaustion from the sheer stress of the past few weeks. When did you last eat? He asked. She stopped, her key halfway to the lock. She thought, I had coffee this morning. I don't remember. He put his hand over hers, gently taking the keys. He unlocked the door and pushed it open. The apartment was quiet. Her neighbor, Mrs. Petrova, was asleep in the armchair. Jamie bundled in a blanket on the sofa. Dominic woke the neighbor, paid her twice what Olivia owed, and saw the older woman out. Olivia stood in the middle of her small living room, bewildered. What are you doing? Go sit down, Olivia, he said. It was a command, but it was gentle. He walked into her tiny, peeling paint kitchen. He opened her refrigerator. It was, as he had suspected, nearly empty. A half-gallon of milk for Jamie, a box of baking soda, and a single withered apple. He had expected this. He went back to the doorway, picked up a grocery bag he had left in the hall, and brought it in. I can't accept that, she said, seeing the bag. It's pasta, he said, and garlic. It's not a diamond necklace. Sit down. She sank onto the sofa, pulling the blanket over Jamie. She watched, in a state of surreal disbelief, as this man, this powerful, intimidating stranger, moved around her kitchen. He found her only pot, found the olive oil, found the salt. He moved with an easy, practiced grace. He cooked simple spaghetti with garlic and oil. The same dish she had almost ordered at Vesuvio's, the apartment filled with the rich, warm smell, a smell that made her realize she was starving. He made 2 plates, brought them to the coffee table, and sat in the worn-out armchair. They ate in silence. The pasta was the best thing she had ever tasted. When she was finished, she looked up at him. He was watching her, his own plate untouched. "Why?" she whispered, her throat tight. "Why what? Why all of this? The job, the rides, this… You don't even know me." Dominic looked at her, his gaze holding hers. "I know that you are hungry," he said, as if it were the only answer that mattered. He took her plate. He washed the dishes. Placing them carefully in her drying rack, he dried his hands on a dish rag. He was ready to leave. She walked him to the door. The tension in the small apartment was so thick she could barely breathe. He had fed her. He had seen the inside of her refrigerator. He had been kind. It was more intimate than any touch. They stood at the doorway, inches apart. She had to tilt her head back to look at him. She could smell the faint, clean scent of his soap and the expensive wool of his coat. "Thank you, Dominic," she whispered, "for the dinner." "You're welcome, Olivia." He did not move. He was looking at her, his eyes dark and intense. He was looking at her mouth. She knew he was going to kiss her, and the most terrifying part was that she wanted him to. He lifted his hand, and she flinched. A tiny, involuntary movement. He paused, his hand hovering, then, very slowly, he brushed a stray strand of hair from her temple. His fingers were warm, his touch impossibly light. Her eyes fluttered shut. He leaned in. He was slow, deliberate, giving her every chance to pull away. She could feel the warmth of his breath on her skin. She did not pull away. She leaned forward, just a fraction of an inch, her lips parting. They were a breath away, a heartbeat away. "Mom?" The small voice shattered the moment. They sprang apart, Olivia's face burning with a flush so hot it hurt. Dominic stepped back, his expression smoothing over, though his eyes were still dark. Jamie was standing in the short hallway, rubbing his eyes, his teddy bear clutched in his hand. "Mom, I had a dream." Olivia rushed to him, scooping him up. "It's okay, baby, it's okay, Mommy's here." Dominic watched them, the woman and her son. He looked at Jamie, and the corner of his mouth twitched, the hard line of his jaw softening. He hid a smile. "He should be in bed," Dominic said, his voice a low gravel. "Yes," Olivia said, her back to him, her face buried in Jamie's hair. I will. Good night." "Good night, Olivia," he said. He nodded at the boy. "Good night, Jamie." She heard the door click shut. She leaned against it, her heart pounding a frantic, messy rhythm against her ribs, her lips tingling from a kiss that had never even happened. The weeks that followed settled into a strange, fragile rhythm. The man named Dominic, who cooked pasta in her kitchen and drove a car worth more than her entire life, became a fixed point in her chaotic world. He was, she had to admit, meticulously respectful. He never stayed late. He never pushed. He never referenced the almost kiss in the doorway. He simply existed, a quiet, powerful presence at the edges of her life. Olivia began to see him not as a monster, but as a man of profound, unsettling contrasts. She saw the way the city's most important people, the ones in the papers, the ones who ran the banks, approached his table at the Onyx Room. They were deferential, their smiles tight with a respect that looked exactly like fear. They leaned in, spoke in low voices, and Dominic would just nod, his face impassive, a king holding court in a jazz club. Then she would see him at the end of her shift, waiting by his car to drive her home. He would ask about Jamie. He listened, truly listened, as she recounted a small story about her son trading his sandwich for a pack of crayons. "He got the better end of that deal," Dominic had said, his voice serious. "Food is temporary, but what he can create with those crayons, that lasts." She had looked at him then, really looked at him in the dim glow of the dashboard lights. He wasn't just being polite. He meant it. He was kind. He was respectful. And he was. She knew with a certainty that settled in her bones. Lethally dangerous. The two truths warred in her, leaving her constantly off balance, constantly exhausted. He was gentle, especially when Jamie was near. One Saturday, he had driven her home from an errand. He had coincidentally been at the pharmacy when she was picking up Jamie's vitamins. When they got to her building, Jamie was sitting on the apartment steps with Mrs. Petrova, waiting. Jamie, who was shy and slow to trust, looked at the massive, dark Mercedes. He looked at the man who unfolded himself from the driver's seat. Dominic was an imposing figure, a man who moved with the deliberate weight of absolute authority. "Mommy!" Jamie ran to her, wrapping his arms around her legs. "Hey, Bug, was Mrs. Petrova good to you?" Olivia asked, kissing the top of his head. "She gave me cookies." "Who's that?" Jamie whispered, pointing at Dominic, who stood by the car, keeping his distance. "That's Mr. Dominic. He gave us a ride." Dominic nodded once at the boy. Jamie, brave in the daylight, walked slowly toward him. He stopped a few feet away. "Are you the man who likes the bad coffee?" Olivia's face flushed with mortification. "Jamie, that's rude." A small, almost invisible smile touched the corner of Dominic's mouth. "It is the worst coffee in Crestwood," he admitted, "but the company was good." Jamie seemed to accept this. He held up his hand. "Look what I found." In his palm was a bottle cap, a small, smooth gray stone, and a single rusted key. "That's a fine collection," Dominic said, crouching down. The movement was fluid, his expensive suit jacket pulling tight across his broad shoulders. He hunkered down to the boy's level, a giant man meeting a small one on equal terms. "This is the key," Jamie said, his voice proud. "It's for a treasure chest. I haven't found the chest yet." "Sometimes the key is the treasure," Dominic replied. He pointed to the gray stone. "And this one has been in the ocean. You can tell by the edges. It's traveled a long way to find you." Jamie's eyes went wide with wonder. He looked from the stone to Dominic's face. "Wow, how did you know?" "I know things," Dominic said softly. He stood up, his gaze meeting Olivia's over Jamie's head. In that moment, she was not afraid of him. She felt something else, something warm and aching in her chest. She saw a man who understood value, who saw treasure in a bottle cap, and who knew, instinctively, how to speak to her son as if he mattered. The night it happened, a cold, late October rain was lashing against the windows of the Onyx room. It was almost 2 a.m, an hour past closing. The last of the businessmen had finally left, their laughter swallowed by the storm. The jazz trio had packed their instruments and gone. It was just Olivia and Dominic. She was in the small office, counting the reservation sheets, her shift officially over. He was in his booth, as he always was, finishing a glass of dark liquor. She gathered her coat, the thin wool inadequate for the downpour outside. She was dreading the run to the bus stop. "You're not taking the bus in this." His voice came from the darkness. She turned. He was standing by the end of the bar, watching her. "I have to get home. Dominic, Jamie will be awake by 7. "I'll drive you." He motioned for her to wait and shrugged on his own heavy overcoat. They walked to the main door. He pushed it open, and a sheet of wind and rain blasted the entryway. The street was flooded, the gutters overflowing. "We'll wait a few minutes," he said, pulling the door shut. "It can't last." They stood in the club's foyer, the only light coming from the small onyx sign glowing blue above the bar. The silence was thick, broken only by the drumming of the rain on the roof. She was suddenly intensely aware of him, the way he smelled, like his soap in the cold night air, the sheer size of him. He made the large foyer feel small. "Thank you," she said, her voice too quiet. "For the ride?" "For the job," she clarified, clutching her coat tighter. "For everything. You didn't have to. You've been "What?" he asked, turning to face her fully. "Kind," she whispered, meeting his gaze. "No one has been kind to me in a very long time, not without wanting something." He was very still. "And what do you think I want, Olivia?" Her heart hammered. She didn't know. That was the problem. "I don't know." "Yes, you do," he said, his voice a low vibration. He took a step closer. He was not crowding her, but he was suddenly, inescapably there. I can't," she stammered, thinking of Jamie, of Trevor, of the chasm between their two worlds. "I know," he said. He was so close now she could see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes. "You're a good mother. You're afraid. You think of your son before you take your next breath." "I have to," she said, her voice cracking. "I know," he said again. He lifted his hand, the one that wore the heavy gold ring, and, just as he had in her apartment, he moved slowly, giving her time to flinch, time to run. She didn't run. He cupped her jaw, his thumb brushing over the frantic pulse just below her ear. His hand was large, warm, and surprisingly gentle. It covered the side of her face, holding her as if she were something precious. "You've been running for so long," he murmured. "You can stop for a minute. Olivia, just 1 minute." He leaned in, his gaze dropping to her mouth. She was trembling, but it was not entirely from fear. It was from the shock of being seen. He saw her, not as a victim, not as a problem, but as a woman. He made her feel wanted. He made her feel, for the first time in her life, profoundly safe. When his lips finally touched hers, it was not a collision, it was a landing. The kiss was slow, hesitant at first, a question. He was tasting, learning. His lips were firm, warm, and unbearably patient. She, in contrast, was a mess of shattered nerves, her own lips trembling against his. He felt her fear, and he deepened the kiss, not with force, but with a steady, grounding pressure. He angled his head, and she made a small sound in the back of her throat, a sigh of surrender that had been trapped for years. Her hands, which had been clenched at her sides, unclenched. She reached up, her fingers gripping the lapels of his expensive coat, holding on like he was the only solid thing in a world that was tilting. The heat was instantaneous. It bloomed low in her belly, a warmth that spread through her limbs, chasing out the cold. His other hand came up, splaying against the small of her back, pulling her flush against him. She felt the solid, unyielding wall of his chest, the strength in him, and she leaned into it. It was a slow, emotional burn, a kiss full of unspoken words, of hesitation melting into a deep, desperate heat. It was the safest she had ever felt, and the most dangerous. And then, clear as a bell in her mind, she saw Jamie's face. She saw her son, his small, trusting smile. She saw this man, this world, the dark cars, the fear he inspired, and she realized what she was doing. She was inviting the monster in. She was putting her son in the path of a world that would crush him. She tore her mouth from his, pushing against his chest. "No!" she gasped, her voice ragged. I can't! She stumbled back, her hands flying to her mouth, her eyes wide with panic. "Dominic, I can't do this. I'm sorry." Dominic's face was unreadable. His chest rose and fell with a single, deep breath. His hands, which had been holding her, dropped to his sides. He did not try to reach for her. He did not argue. He simply respected it. "I'm sorry," she said again, fumbling for the door handle. I'll take the bus." "Olivia," he said, his voice rough. "I have to go." She yanked the door open and ran out into the storm, the rain hitting her like a slap, soaking her in seconds. She ran, her sobs lost in the wind, leaving him standing in the warm, blue light of the empty club. Dominic watched her go, his jaw tight, his hands clenched into fists. He did not move for a long time. He had felt her response. He had felt the desperate, real passion that matched his own, and he had felt her terror, a force even stronger. He knew what he had to do. He would respect her space. He would let her run, but he would never, ever, let her be unsafe. He took out his phone and made a call. "She's on foot," he said, "on her way to the 11th Street bus stop. Keep your distance, but I want eyes on her until she is locked in her apartment. Am I clear?" "Yes, boss," the voice on the other end replied. He hung up and stared out at the rain, the taste of her still on his lips. For a week, Olivia avoided him. She took the bus, leaving for her shift an hour early and taking a longer, more public route. She arrived at the Onyx Room just as her shift began and left the second it was over. Usually, when other staff were leaving, a small crowd she could lose herself in. At work, she was professional, cold and efficient. She kept her eyes on the reservation book. Dominic was there. In his booth, he watched her. He did not approach. He did not send for her. He let her have the space she had demanded, but his presence was a heavy weight on her, a constant reminder of the kiss, of the moment she had, for a second, let herself fall. The internal conflict was tearing her apart. She was terrified of his world, but she missed his protection. She missed his voice. She missed the way he looked at her, as if she were the only person in the room. She was overwhelmed, and she knew, with a sickening certainty, that something had to break. It broke on a Thursday. The club was busy, a low thrum of conversation and the smooth sound of the saxophone filling the air. Olivia was at the hostess stand, her back to the door, reviewing the reservations for the 9 o'clock hour. Well, look at you. The voice was not Weasel's. It was the one from her nightmares. The voice that had whispered promises and then, hours later, screamed curses. Olivia Monroe froze. Every drop of blood in her body turned to ice. She did not have to turn around. She knew. Trevor. She turned. Slowly, her hand gripping the edge of the heavy wooden stand. He was standing right in front of her. He was cleaner than she had ever seen him. His usual greasy hair was cut short, combed. He was wearing a cheap blazer, trying to look the part. The change was terrifying. It meant he was serious. It meant he was thinking. "Trevor," she said, her voice a dead, flat whisper. "You can't be here." "I can't?" He smiled, a thin, reptilian smile that didn't reach his cold, pale eyes. "Looks like you're the one who's here. Liv, a high-class bar. Look at you. Little black dress. Makeup. Who are you trying to impress?" "You need to leave. Now," she said, her eyes darting to the back of the room. She could see Tony and Polly, Dominic's men, at their usual table. They were watching, their bodies suddenly alert. "Oh, I'm not going anywhere," Trevor sneered, leaning on her stand, invading her space. "I'm a customer. I'm here to see my family. I've missed you. Liv, I've missed my boy." "He's not your boy," she hissed, her fear momentarily eclipsed by a wave of pure hatred. "That's not what a judge is going to say. See, I'm a changed man. I've got a job. I'm stable. And you? You're working nights in a gin joint, leaving our son with God knows who, Child Protective Services. They're going to eat this up." He was threatening to take Jamie. This was her worst fear. Realized. You won't get him. I have a restraining order." Trevor laughed, a short, ugly sound. "A piece of paper. I'm filing for custody. Olivia, this week, and I'm going to win, unless you and I can come to an arrangement, you and me, and Jamie. We can be a family again." "No," she said, shaking her head, backing away. "Get away from me." "Oh, don't you walk away from me, Liv!" His voice rose, the mask of the changed man slipping. The familiar rage flashed in his eyes. He lunged, grabbing her, not her arm, her wrist, his fingers clamped down. A circle of steel, twisting. "You are going to listen to me." Olivia cried out, a sharp intake of pained breath. At the back table, Tony started to stand up. Polly put a hand on his arm. "Wait, the boss. Wait." The club had gone quiet. The jazz trio faltered. "Let her go." The voice cut through the silence. Cold, quiet, and absolute. It was not a shout, it was a command. Trevor froze. He turned. Dominic was walking toward them. He was not rushing. He moved with a terrifying, deliberate calm, his face carved from ice. He had come from his office, his eyes fixed on the man who was holding Olivia. "Who the hell are you?" Trevor sneered, though his grip on Olivia's wrist loosened slightly. "Her new boyfriend? The one paying for all this?" Dominic did not answer. He stopped 3 feet away. He looked at Trevor's hand, still clamped on Olivia's wrist. "I said," Dominic repeated, his voice even lower, even more dangerous. "Let her go." Trevor, facing this man's sheer, immovable presence, instinctively released her. Olivia stumbled back, cradling her wrist, her body shaking so hard she could barely stand. Dominic's eyes lifted from her wrist to Trevor's face. He looked at him, a predator studying a lower, less intelligent species. "You," Dominic said, "made a mistake." "Yeah, what mistake is that?" Trevor blustered, trying to regain his footing. Dominic stepped forward, moving into the space between Trevor and Olivia, shielding her with his body. He was inches from Trevor, looking down at him. "You touched her," Dominic said, his voice a soft, lethal promise. He nodded at the hand that had held her. "Touch her again and you won't have hands left." The threat was so quiet, so devoid of emotion, that it was more terrifying than any shout. It was not a threat, it was a statement of fact, a prophecy. Trevor's face went pale. He finally understood. This was not a businessman. This was not a boyfriend. This was the top of the food chain. Dominic gave a short, sharp nod over his shoulder. Tony and Polly were there in an instant. They each took one of Trevor's arms in a grip that was professional and unbreakable. "I'm a customer," Trevor yelped, his panic rising. You can't touch me." "This way, sir," Polly said, his voice polite. "You seem to be lost." They dragged him, his feet scraping the plush carpet, toward the door and threw him out onto the wet pavement. The club was deathly silent. The jazz trio stared. The customers stared. Olivia was leaning against the wall, her hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with a mixture of pure terror and a dizzying, overwhelming relief. Dominic turned to her. His face was still hard, the fury rolling off him in palpable waves, but when his eyes met hers, the coldness receded, replaced by a fierce, protective concern. "Are you hurt?" he asked, his voice rough. She just shook her head. Unable to speak, she was shaking from head to toe. He had done it. He had stepped out of the shadows. He had brought his world, his power, crashing into hers, right in front of everyone. He was exactly what she was afraid of, and he was the only thing that had saved her. She looked at him, at the fury still coiled in his shoulders, and her resolve hardened. This was it. This was the danger she could not have near her son. "I quit," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Olivia." "I can't." She grabbed her coat from the office and pushing past him. "I'm sorry, I can't." She ran from the club, past the spot where Trevor had fallen, and she did not stop until she was home. The door locked, the chain on. She avoided him for 3 days. She didn't leave the apartment. She had Mrs. Petrova get her groceries. She sat in the dark, holding Jamie, convinced that Trevor was coming back, or that Dominic's men were, or that the whole world was about to collapse. On the 3rd day, Jamie, who'd been watching her pace the floor, came up to her and tugged on her sleeve. "Mommy, why are you so sad?" "I'm not sad, honey. I'm just thinking." "Are you sad because of Mr. D?" he asked. Her heart stopped. What about Mr. D?" Jamie looked down at his shoes. "I like him. He talks to me like I'm a grown-up. He said my rock was a traveler from the ocean." He looked up at her, his eyes clear and trusting. "I trust him, Mom." Olivia felt the tears well up, hot and painful. She pulled him into a hug, burying her face in his hair, her heart aching with a pain so sharp it stole her breath. He trusted Dominic, and the terrible secret truth was that she did too, and she could not, would not allow it. That night, there was a knock, not a loud, demanding knock, a quiet, firm, patient one. She knew it was him. She opened the door, her body rigid. He was standing in the hallway, his overcoat damp from the lingering mist. He looked tired. "You can't be here," she said, her voice a low, frantic whisper. "He'll see you. Trevor, see, he knows I work for you. He'll use it. He'll take Jamie." "He won't take Jamie," Dominic said, his voice calm. "You don't know that. You don't know him. He'll come back, or men like him will, or men like you will." She was finally yelling, the hysteria of the past week bubbling over. "You come into my life with your money and your quiet cars and your kindness, and you make me feel safe, but you're not safe, Dominic. You're the most dangerous thing that has ever happened to me. I can't have this in my son's life. You have to leave. You have to leave us alone." She was breathing hard, tears streaming down her face. He just stood there. He listened, absorbing every word, every ounce of her fear and her pain. He did not flinch. When she was finished, her shoulders slumped in defeat. He took one step, just one, into her doorway. He did not touch her. "You're right," he said, his voice quiet. "My world is dangerous. But you've been living in Trevor's world. You've been living in a world where the police tell you to stop being a victim. You're alone, and you're exposed." He looked past her, at the small apartment, at the thin, single locked door. "You think you're choosing safety for him by choosing to be alone, but you're not. You're choosing to be a target." He met her gaze, his eyes burning with an intensity that held her captive. "You don't have to choose between love and safety," he said, his voice a raw, final promise. "Not with me." He held her gaze for one long, agonizing second, then he turned, his coat swirling, and walked away down the hall, his footsteps echoing until they were gone. Dominic's last words hung in the hallway of her apartment building, a promise that was equal parts a comfort and a threat. "You don't have to choose between love and safety. Not with me." She had slammed the door, her heart aching, and slid the chain. She had chosen what she always had to choose, the illusion of safety, bought with her own loneliness. She chose Jamie. But the choice, it turned out, was no longer hers to make. 2 days later, the knock came. It was not Dominic's quiet, firm rap. It was a sharp, official series of 3 knocks that sent a jolt of ice through her veins. She looked through the peephole. A woman stood there, her hair in a severe bun, holding a clipboard. She was not a police officer. She was something worse. Olivia opened the door, her hand trembling on the chain. "Can I help you?" "Are you Olivia Monroe?" the woman asked, her voice flat, devoid of sympathy. "Yes, who are you?" "My name is Miss Albright. I'm with Crestwood Child Protective Services. I'm here to follow up on a petition filed regarding the custody of your son, James." The floor seemed to drop out from under her. This was it. The sergeant at the precinct had warned her, "You're on thin ice." "A petition? Filed by who?" Olivia asked, though she already knew the answer, a cold, hard knot of dread in her stomach. "The petitioner is Trevor Hayes. He has expressed significant concerns about your living situation and your ability to provide a stable environment." "Miss..." Albright's eyes flicked past Olivia into the small, dim apartment, noting the peeling paint on the wall. "May I come in?" It was not a request. Olivia, numb, undid the chain and let her in. Jamie was at school. Thank God. Miss Albright walked into the center of the living room, her clipboard held like a shield. "Mr. Hayes has made several allegations. Unstable housing, associations with disreputable individuals." "He's the disreputable individual," Olivia burst out, her voice shaking with a desperate, high-pitched anger. "He's the one I have a restraining order against. He threatened me. He threatened to take my son." "Yes, we have that in our report," Miss Albright said, her pen ticking a box. We also have a report from your former employer, the Blue Plate Diner, that you were terminated due to, disturbances caused by Mr. Hayes' associates. Is that correct? They fired me because they were scared, because I was being threatened. And where are you employed now, Miss Monroe? Olivia froze. I'm between jobs. Miss Albright made another note. Her eyes scanned the room. She saw the single, flimsy lock on the door. She saw the kitchen chair, the one Olivia wedged under the knob every night, still sitting beside it. And, Miss Albright continued, her voice hardening, Mr. Hayes also alleges you are in a new relationship, that you are employed by and associating with a man known to law enforcement, a Mr. Dominic Romano. Olivia felt the blood drain from her face. I worked for him as a hostess. It was a job. A job at the Onyx Room, a nightclub, Miss Albright said, her tone thick with judgment. A man, Mr. Hayes claims is the head of an organized crime family. Is that the stable environment you're providing for a 6-year-old boy? Miss Monroe? A war between your abusive ex and a known mafia boss? No, it's not like that. He's Dominic, and he's been kind to us. He helped me. He helped you, Miss Albright repeated, the words dripping with sarcasm. The court will take a very dim view of this kind of help. A hearing will be set. A judge will decide if James should be placed in a more suitable home while this is sorted out, perhaps with Mr. Hayes' family. You can't, Olivia whispered, tears welling, hot and fast. You can't take him. He's all I have. I'm a good mother. Good mothers don't expose their children to this kind of element. Miss Albright walked to the door. You'll be served with a court summons within the next 48 hours. I suggest you find a lawyer. Good day. The door clicked shut. Olivia stood in the middle of the room, her body shaking so violently she thought her bones would come apart. He had done it. Trevor had found the one weapon that could destroy her. He was using Dominic, the only man who had ever tried to protect her, as the bullet. She was going to lose Jamie. She collapsed onto the sofa, her mind racing. She had to run. She had to pack a bag, grab Jamie from school, and just get on a bus. Any bus, going anywhere. She would live in a shelter. She was sobbing, a raw animal sound of pure terror. When her phone buzzed, she'd never given him her number. She looked at the screen. It just said Dominic. She answered, her hand shaking. Hello? She's gone, his voice said, not a question. How did you know? Pack a bag, Olivia. One for you, one for Jamie. Nothing else. I'm downstairs. You have 5 minutes. Dominic, I can't. You're the reason this is happening. They're taking him, she said. She said because of you. If I go with you, it proves he's right. Listen to me, he said, his voice calm, cutting through her panic. You are not running. We are repositioning. The court summons she mentioned. They have to serve it to you. If you are not here, they cannot serve it. Trevor's petition will stall. They'll find me. They'll find me with you. No, he said. They won't. I've been preparing for this since the night he threatened you at the club. They will be looking for Olivia Monroe, a struggling single mother. She's about to disappear. You have 4 minutes. The line went dead. She was still resisting, still trembling. When he knocked on her door 2 minutes later, he didn't wait. He used a key she had never given him. The lock clicked open, and he was there. He saw her, wild-eyed, holding a single, small backpack. Good, he said. He walked past her and went to the small, cheap desk by the window. He grabbed the electric bill, the one she had just paid. They'll track your credit, your utilities. This all goes dark. I'm scared, Dominic, she whispered, her fight gone, replaced by a deep, numbing cold. I know, he said. He took the bag from her hand. Let's go get your son. She resisted one last time. At the door of the car. What if you're wrong? What if this makes it worse? It's already worse, he said, his eyes meeting hers. You're in a fight you can't win, so I'm going to win it for you. They picked Jamie up from school. Olivia ran in, signed him out early, her face pale. claiming a family emergency. Jamie, however, was thrilled to see Dominic's car. "Are we going on an adventure, Mr. D?" Dominic looked at him in the rearview mirror. "We are, Jamie, a new one." They did not drive to the Warren. They did not drive to the docks, or the industrial parts of town she associated with Dominic's business. He drove them downtown, to the glittering, glass and steel heart of Crestwood, a neighborhood she only ever saw when she was cleaning its empty offices at 3 in the morning. He pulled into the subterranean garage of a luxury high-rise, a place with a 24-hour doorman and heated sidewalks. "Where are we?" Olivia whispered. "A safe place," he said. He led them to a private elevator. It opened directly into an apartment on the 30th floor. The moment the doors slid open, Olivia gasped. Her old apartment would have fit into the entryway. It was vast. The entire far wall was floor-to-ceiling glass, offering a staggering, panoramic view of Crestwood, the river, and the hills beyond. It was furnished with a quiet, modern elegance. Plush gray sofas, dark wood, soft, recessed lighting. The kitchen was a masterpiece of stainless steel and marble. And it was warm. The air was clean, the light was bright. "Dominic, whose apartment is this?" "A friend," he said, setting their single bag down. "He's in Italy for the year. He doesn't mind." The friend, she knew, was as fictional as the name on the lease. This was his... I can't stay here," she said, her voice small. "I can't afford... It's not for rent. Go look." He nodded down a hallway. She walked, her feet sinking into the thick carpet. She passed a large, beautiful bedroom, and then she saw the second room. It was painted a soft, sky blue. There was a small bed, a bookshelf, and a desk. The bookshelf was not empty. It was filled with books for a 6-year-old boy. Dinosaurs, space, superheroes. There was a set of new crayons and a thick pad of drawing paper on the desk. Mom, look!" Jamie's voice. She turned and ran back to the living room. Jamie was standing at another door, one she hadn't noticed. He pulled it open, and his jaw dropped. It opened onto a small, private rooftop garden, a terrace, high in the sky, lined with evergreen shrubs and wooden planters and a small, stone-paved path. "A garden," Jamie breathed, stepping out into the cold, bright air. "It's a garden in the sky. Can we stay here? Mom, please, can we stay?" Olivia stood in the doorway, watching her son run a hand over the leaves of a small, sculpted tree. He was laughing, a pure, uncomplicated sound of joy she had not heard in months. She turned to look at Dominic, who was leaning against the doorframe, watching her. Her eyes filled with tears. She was trapped in a beautiful, gilded cage, high above the city, placed here by the most powerful man she had ever known. But she was safe, and Jamie was happy. She couldn't speak. She just nodded, a single, jerky motion. He nodded back. He understood. The following weeks were surreal. Life in the sky was quiet. Dominic had been right. Trevor's petition stalled. They couldn't find her to serve the papers. The case went cold. Dominic visited, but he kept a respectful distance. He never stayed the night. He came bearing gifts that were practical, thoughtful, and terrifyingly intimate. He brought groceries, bags of them, filling the stainless steel refrigerator with fresh fruit, milk, pasta, and meat. He brought books for Jamie, a new one every few days. He brought things for her, a thick cashmere blanket because he saw her shiver when she looked out the window, a box of expensive tea, the kind she had once mentioned she liked in a passing conversation months ago. He was listening. He was remembering. He would sit on the floor with Jamie, the two of them building elaborate cities out of blocks. Dominic, she learned, had a quiet, dry wit. He would tell Jamie stories, and she would find herself listening, laughing softly from the kitchen. He was, she realized, wooing her, patiently, slowly, and with the same meticulous, overwhelming strategy he must have used to build his empire. One evening, nearly a month after they had moved in, a cold, hard rain lashed against the giant windows, reminding her of the night at the Onyx Room. Jamie was asleep in his blue room, safe and warm. Dominic had let himself in. He had his own key, carrying 2 bags of groceries. "I was thinking Italian," he said, setting them on the marble counter. "You don't have to feed us, Dominic," she said, her voice soft. "I know," he said, not looking at her, already pulling out a block of Parmesan. "I want to—" This time, she didn't just watch. She uncorked the bottle of red wine he'd brought. She found a cutting board. They moved around the kitchen, a quiet, comfortable rhythm developing between them. She chopped garlic while he browned sausage. They barely spoke, but the silence was full, charged with an intimacy that was deeper than any conversation. They ate at the small table in the kitchen, the city lights glittering like a carpet of diamonds below them. This is the best meal I've ever had," she said, and she meant it. "It's just pasta," he replied, a small smile touching his lips. "No," she said, looking at him over the rim of her wine glass. "It's not—" After, he started to gather the plates, but she stopped him. "I'll get them." "Olivia—" "Let me," she insisted. "You cooked." He stood, watching her as she rinsed the plates and put them in the dishwasher. He was supposed to leave. It was his time to leave. He always left after dinner. But this time, he didn't move toward the door. She finished, drying her hands on a towel. She turned. He was standing right there. "Thank you for dinner," she whispered. "You're welcome." The air was electric. The sound of the rain, the low hum of the city, all of it faded. There was only him, his dark eyes, his sighs, the faint smell of wine and soap. She was not afraid of him, not anymore. "Dominic," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't go. Please stay." His eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of hesitation, of fear. He found none. He didn't move. He waited. She put her hands on his chest, her fingers splaying over the fine wool of his sweater, feeling the solid, living warmth of him beneath it. "Stay," she whispered again. He covered her hands with his own. "Are you sure, Olivia?" She answered by rising on her toes and kissing him. It was not like the first kiss. The hesitant, frantic, rain-soaked collision. This was deliberate. This was a choice. She kissed him, and he did not respond for a full second, as if her choice had stunned him. Then, with a low groan that vibrated through her hands, he kissed her back, his arms wrapped around her, one hand splayed across her back, the other tangling in her hair, tilting her head. The kiss was deep and slow and desperate. It was a kiss that spoke of lonely nights, of pent-up fear, of a gratitude so profound it was almost painful. He lifted her, as if she weighed nothing, and set her on the cool marble counter. So she was at his level. He broke the kiss to look at her, his forehead resting against hers, his breathing ragged. "You've undone me, Olivia," he whispered, his voice thick. "Good," she breathed, her fingers working at the buttons of his shirt, needing to feel his skin. "You saved me. Now, let me." She led him from the kitchen, not to the bedroom, but to the couch, the one that faced the window, the one that faced the storm. It was a slow, tender unraveling. There was no rush, only discovery. He was so large, she so small, but he made himself gentle. His hands, which she knew could be brutal, were now impossibly tender. He touched her face, her neck, her arms, as if he were memorizing her. She was just as desperate, her hands tracing the hard, sculpted muscles of his chest, the line of his jaw. She was learning him, too. She was not a victim being taken. She was a woman, finally taking... It was emotional, a collision of vulnerability and strength. It was the whisper of her fears against his skin and the low, steady murmur of his promises in her ear. He held her, moved with her, his rhythm slow and deep, his eyes never leaving hers, watching her in the flashing light of the storm until she finally let go. She woke hours later to the pale, gray light of dawn. She was on the couch, tangled in the cashmere blanket and in Dominic's arms. His arm was a heavy, warm weight around her waist, his face buried in her hair. She did not move. She lay there, listening to the sound of his steady breathing. For the first time in her adult life, she had slept through the night. She had not woken at 2 and 3 and 4 to check the locks. She had not had the nightmare about Trevor. She had woken up safe. Dominic, however, was not. His growing distraction had not gone unnoticed. In a smoke-filled room in the back of a social club in the Old Quarter, 4 old men sat at a card table. He moved her. Vieri, the oldest, said, laying down a card, to the tower, a $3 million apartment. He's flaunting her. She's a weakness. Vieri, a single mother. He's soft. Another man, Sal, grunted Sal, a capo who had long coveted Dominic's position, saw an opportunity. He's not a boss, he's a bodyguard for a waitress. He is compromised. Vieri agreed. This cannot stand. We will watch. We will wait. And Trevor, desperate and broke, had finally found someone who would listen. He had made a call to a number he'd been given, a number for Sal. I know, Trevor had whispered into the phone. You guys are unhappy with Romano. I can help. I know the woman. I know the kid. I can get them. Sal had listened, his eyes cold. Keep talking. 2 days later, Olivia felt confident enough to take Jamie to the park near the apartment. It was a crisp, sunny afternoon. They were throwing a ball when she saw it. A black Lincoln, parked across the street. It was not one of Dominic's cars. The windows were tinted. She could feel the eyes on her. Her blood ran cold. She grabbed Jamie's hand. Honey, game's over. We have to go. Now. She hurried him back to the building, her heart pounding. When she got inside the apartment, she locked the door and the security bolt and slid the chain. When Dominic arrived that evening, he found her pale and shaking, sitting in the dark. What is it? He demanded, seeing her face. I was followed, she whispered. To the park, a black car, not yours. His face, which had been soft when he entered, turned to granite. What did they look like? I don't know. I saw the car. I felt them watching. It wasn't Trevor. It was something else. Someone like you. The fury that rolled off him was so cold it was almost silent. This was not the hot anger he'd had for Trevor. This was an Arctic rage. This was betrayal. He took out his phone and made a single call. Marco, a black Lincoln, at the park on Elm this afternoon. Find out who was in it and find out who sent them. I want a name. And when you get it, you handle it. A silent war. Marco, no noise. Just results. He hung up. Olivia was watching him, her hand over her mouth. This was not about Trevor anymore. This was about him, his world. This is because of me, she whispered, her voice full of a new, dawning horror. They're coming after you because of us. She, who had been so afraid of his world, had never considered that she was the danger, that her presence in his life, his love for her, was the very thing that could get him killed. Dominic, she said, her voice cracking as she stood, you have to go. This is what I was afraid of. I can't be the reason you get hurt. You have to leave. End this. Please, for your own safety. He turned to her, his face a mask of cold, controlled fury. He walked toward her and gripped her arms, not painfully, but with an intensity that stopped her breath. It's too late for that, he said, his voice low and guttural. They didn't just follow me, Olivia, they followed you. They threatened you, and they threatened your son. That makes this my war. I'm already in this. You're not walking out alone. Dominic's words, you're not walking out alone, were a vow. And in his world, vows were sealed in action, not just air. The silent war he had declared was just that. In the 2 weeks that followed the black car incident, a high-level captain in Sal's crew was suddenly arrested on a federal tax evasion charge that was 20 years old. a shipping container belonging to Vieri's nephew, full of contraband, accidentally fell into Crestwood Harbor. The men who had been in the Lincoln found themselves unemployed, their homes foreclosed on, their lives systematically dismantled from a distance. Dominic was demonstrating his reach. He was a surgeon, and the traitors were a cancer. He was cutting them out, quietly, precisely, and with lethal effect. But while Dominic was fighting a war of shadows, Trevor Hayes was a desperate, stupid animal, and desperate animals were predictable. He had lost his leverage with Sal's crew. They saw him as a liability who had brought Dominic's full attention down on them. He had no money, no allies, and his petition for custody was dead in the water. The papers unserved. He had only one move left, the one he had threatened all along. Jamie's school was a small brick building on a street lined with aging oak trees. It let out at 3:15. At 3 o'clock, Trevor Hayes parked a stolen, dented sedan a block away, his hands shaking, his eyes darting nervously. He had a bag of candy on the passenger seat, as if that was all it would take. At 3:17, the bell rang. A flood of children burst from the doors, from a dark blue work van parked across from the school. Paulie, one of Dominic's men, adjusted his baseball cap and spoke into a small microphone on his collar. "Target is emerging. He's in the group. Red backpack, dinosaur keychain." "I see him." Tony's voice crackled back. Tony was on foot, dressed as a city maintenance worker, pretending to inspect a lamppost near the school's gate. Trevor got out of his car, his cheap blazer pulled tight. He walked quickly, trying to look like just another parent. He saw Jamie, walking by himself, heading for the corner where Mrs. Petrova always met him. "Jamie!" Trevor called out, forcing a smile that looked like a grimace. "Hey, buddy, it's your dad." Jamie froze. He recognized the voice from his nightmares, the voice that had made his mother cry. He looked at Trevor, his small face pale with terror. "You're not my dad." "Come on, Jamie," Trevor said, his voice dropping to a desperate, ugly whine. He was 10 feet away. I got candy. In the car. We're going on a trip, just you and me." He lunged, grabbing for the strap of Jamie's backpack. "Let's go!" Jamie screamed, a high, terrified sound that cut through the afternoon air. Trevor didn't even have a full second. Tony, the maintenance worker, moved with a speed that was terrifying for a man his size. He covered the distance in 2 strides, his hand the size of a dinner plate clamping down on Trevor's shoulder. The grip spun Trevor around, his hand ripping from Jamie's backpack. Trevor looked up into Tony's cold, impassive face. "I don't think so," Tony said, his voice a calm, gravelly rumble. At the same time, the side door of the work van slid open with a hydraulic hiss. Paulie was out, moving not toward Trevor, but toward Jamie. "Hey, kid," Paulie said, his voice surprisingly gentle. He knelt, putting his body between Jamie and the confrontation. "You're okay. Big guy's just making a citizen's arrest. This man's a stranger. You did good, screaming." Jamie was hyperventilating, his eyes wide, tears streaming down his face, but he was physically untouched. Trevor, seeing Paulie by the boy and Tony in his face, tried to swing. It was a pathetic, wild punch. Tony didn't even block it. He simply absorbed it, then drove his other fist, once, into Trevor's stomach. The air left Trevor's body in a single, agonizing whoosh. He collapsed, wheezing, on the pavement. A siren wailed in the distance. Already on its way. Tony had called it in 3 minutes ago. Paulie scooped up Jamie's backpack, which had fallen to the ground, and handed it to him. "Your mom's on her way, kid. We're Mr. Dominic's friends. We're here to make sure you're safe. See? Police are here. You're safe." By the time Olivia arrived, her heart trying to escape her chest after a frantic, one-sentence call from Dominic, she saw it all. Jamie, safe. Wrapped in a blanket in the back of Mrs. Petrova's car, physically unharmed but shaking. Trevor, his face pale and sweating, being loaded into the back of a police car in handcuffs. And 2 men she recognized from the Onyx room, Tony and Paulie, giving a calm, measured statement to an officer, explaining how they'd seen a man attempting to abduct a child and had intervened. She ran to Jamie, pulling him into her arms, burying her face in his hair. Her body racked with a combination of terror and a relief so profound it felt like pain. When she got him back to the apartment, she locked the door, and then she finally, truly broke. She was on the floor, her back against the door, holding her son so tightly he could barely breathe. When Dominic let himself in, he saw them, the mother and son, clinging to each other. He saw Olivia's face, a mask of such raw, primal terror that it stopped his heart. He knelt in front of her. "He's okay," he said, his voice a low, steady anchor in her storm. "He's safe. It's over." That was what did it, his quiet, absolute certainty. The sobs that had been stuck in her throat tore out of her. It was a complete unraveling, the accumulated terror of years, all the running, all the fear, all the nights spent with a chair under the doorknob. He touched him, Dominic," she wept, her voice breaking. "He put his hands on my son. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep him safe. I'm not strong enough. Oh, Yes, you are," Dominic said, his voice rough. He put his hands on her arms, and when she finally released her death grip on Jamie, he pulled her to him. She collapsed against his chest, her hands fisting in his shirt, her tears soaking the expensive fabric. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly, his hand cradling the back of her head, simply absorbing the storm. He let her cry until she was empty. "Shh," he murmured into her hair. "It's okay. I've got you. You're not alone anymore. Olivia, I told you. You are not alone." He held her for a long time until her sobs quieted into ragged, exhausted breaths. "I swear to you," he whispered, his voice a vow, "no one will ever touch your son again." He looked over her head at Jamie, who was watching them with wide, tear-filled eyes. Dominic met the boy's gaze. "I promise. Jamie, it's over." The next day, Dominic Romano revealed the true, terrifying extent of his power, and it did not come from the barrel of a gun. He made a series of phone calls from his home office, not to capos, but to men in $3,000 suits. "Arthur," he said to the city's most feared and effective defense attorney, "I have a new client for you. Her name is Olivia Monroe. Yes, she'll be testifying against Trevor Hayes. No, he won't be getting bail. Yes, I'll send the files. Michael," he said to the head of Crestwood's most ruthless private investigation firm, "the files I had you compile on Trevor Hayes, all of them. The gambling debts in Atlantic City, the unpaid taxes, the witness statements from the accidents in his old warehouse job, the full medicals from the restraining order violation. I want it all delivered to Arthur Feldman's office in 1 hour. He was not just arranging a legal takedown, he was orchestrating an annihilation. He was not just a mafia boss, he was the bank. He owned the men who owned the city." When Olivia walked into the custody hearing 2 weeks later, a hearing that had been fast-tracked with a speed that was almost unheard of, she was terrified. But she was not alone. She wore her one good, dark dress, the one she'd worn as a hostess. She felt small, poor, and out of place in the marble and mahogany courtroom. Then, Arthur Feldman and his 3-person legal team met her at the door. They were silent, immaculate, and radiated an aura of pure, expensive competence. They didn't smile, they simply parted, letting her walk in the center, and moved with her to the plaintiff's table, a silent, gray-suited wall of armor. Trevor was on the other side, looking pale and sick in an ill-fitting suit, a harried-looking public defender at his side. He saw Olivia, and then he saw her legal team, and the color drained from his face. He finally understood that he had not just picked a fight with a waitress. The hearing was a massacre. "Mr. Hayes," Feldman began, his voice a smooth, bored baritone, "you're petitioning for custody on the grounds of providing a stable environment?" Yes, sir, I'm a changed man. I want to raise my son. Is that why you attempted to kidnap him from his elementary school on October 29th? That was a misunderstanding. I just wanted to talk to him. A misunderstanding, I see. Feldman produced a set of glossy photographs. Is this you, Mr. Hayes, with your hands on the child just before being apprehended? The public defender objected, but the judge, a woman who had seen Dominic's friends in her courtroom before, overruled him with a sharp bang of her gavel. For the next hour, Feldman didn't just expose Trevor. He systematically dismantled him. He presented evidence of over $100,000 in outstanding gambling debts. He produced sworn affidavits from 2 of Trevor's former associates, detailing his long-standing drug and alcohol abuse. He produced the medical reports, the ones Olivia had filed years ago, detailing the bruises, the broken wrist. And, Your Honor, Feldman said, we have evidence that Mr. Hayes has, on no fewer than 4 occasions, attempted to intimidate and extort money from my client, Miss Monroe, in direct violation of his restraining order. Finally, Olivia was called to testify. She was shaking as she walked to the stand. She sat, her hands clenched in her lap. Miss Monroe, Feldman said, his voice softening for the first time. Can you tell the court what you are afraid of? Olivia looked at Trevor. He was just a man, a weak, pathetic, cruel man. And then she looked at her lawyers. She felt the invisible, powerful presence of Dominic, a shield around her. She found her voice. I'm afraid of him, she said, her voice clear and steady. I'm afraid of what he does to people. I'm afraid of his rage. I'm afraid of his threats. But mostly, I am afraid for 6 years that he would take my son. And what do you want, Miss Monroe? I want, she said, her voice rising with a strength she never knew she possessed. For my son to be safe, I want him to grow up without looking over his shoulder. I want him to be free. The judge terminated Trevor's parental rights permanently. He was remanded to custody to face the kidnapping charges, as well as new charges of extortion and aggravated harassment. It was over. But Dominic's war had 2 fronts, and the one he fought in the shadows was far from over. Sal and Vieri were furious. Dominic had not only ignored their warnings, he had flaunted his clean power in a public courtroom. He had used the family's assets, the lawyers, the investigators, the judges they owned, for a personal vendetta, for a waitress. He had to be reminded of how the real world worked. The ambush was not subtle. It was a message. Dominic was leaving a late-night meeting at a waterfront warehouse, a meeting with his most loyal men, reassuring them, consolidating his power. He was driving himself, his guards in a follow car behind him. He was on the Industrial Bypass Road, a dark 2-lane stretch of asphalt, when the dump truck pulled out from a side street, its lights off. It was a classic brutal maneuver. Dominic, with reflexes honed by a life of expecting the worst, saw the mass of metal at the last second. He wrenched the wheel, his Mercedes screaming in protest. He avoided a direct head-on collision, but the truck's fender caught the car's rear quarter panel. The impact was catastrophic. The Mercedes spun, a violent, screeching rotation of metal and glass, and slammed, driver's side first, into the concrete abutment of an overpass. The follow car, a black Cadillac Escalade, was immediately blocked by 2 other sedans that screeched to a halt, men piling out, guns firing. Marco, in the passenger seat, was already on the phone. Code red, the boss is hit. Bypass road, send everyone. Dominic was slumped against the deployed airbag, the world a mess of screaming alarms and the smell of gunpowder and burnt rubber. His left arm was numb, his shoulder a white-hot explosion of agony. A piece of shrapnel from the door panel was embedded high in his shoulder. Blood was everywhere, warm and sticky, soaking his shirt. He was alive, but he was trapped. He saw 2 figures approaching his shattered window, their guns raised. He reached for his own, in the glove box, but his left arm wouldn't respond. He fumbled for it with his right hand. A spray of automatic gunfire, deafeningly loud, came from behind him. Marco and his men, having breached the blockade, were advancing, laying down a sheet of covering fire. The two figures by Dominic's car scattered, one of them falling, the other diving back into one of the sedans, which tore off into the night. Marco was at his window, smashing the rest of the glass with the butt of his gun. Boss, can you hear me?" "I can hear you," Dominic gritted, his teeth clamped against the pane. Get me out." Olivia got the call at 2:30 in the morning. It was from a number she didn't recognize. "Miss Monroe?" The voice was strained. It was Marco. "Yes, what is it? What's wrong?" "It's Dominic. There was an accident. He's alive, but he's been hurt. We're at Crestwood General. He's asking for you." She did not remember the ride. She was in the back of a car, a silent man driving, the city lights smearing past the window. She was in the sterile, green-lit hallway of the emergency room. Marco met her. His face was grim, his suit jacket singed. "He's stable. He's out of surgery. They got the shrapnel out, lost a lot of blood, broken ribs, a bad concussion, but he's tough." She was led into a private room. It was dark, save for the rhythmic, pulsing lights of the monitors. He was there, in the bed, looking small and broken in a way she had never imagined. He was pale, a network of tubes and wires connecting him to the beeping machines. His left arm and shoulder were heavily bandaged, his chest wrapped. She walked to the bed, her hand trembling as she touched his, the one without the IV. His skin was warm. He was alive. She sat in the chair beside him, her entire world collapsing to this single, quiet point. All her fear of his world, all her resistance. It had all been a luxury. The thought of him, this strong, unmovable man, being gone. It was an agony she had never anticipated. She sat for hours. She watched the slow, steady rise and fall of his chest. She held his hand, and as the first weak light of dawn began to gray the window, she leaned forward, her tears falling onto his hand, onto the white hospital sheets, onto his chest. "Please," she whispered, her voice a raw, broken thing. "Please, Dominic, don't leave me. You can't leave me. I can't. I love you." She said it, and in the sterile, beeping silence of the hospital room, she knew it was the truest thing she had ever said. He woke 2 days later. His first word was her name, Olivia. She, who had not left his side, shot up from the chair. "I'm here. I'm right here." His eyes, clouded with pain and medication, focused on her. He saw the tear tracks on her face, the dark circles under her eyes. "You're okay," he rasped. "Jamie." "We're fine," she said, her tears starting again, this time from relief. "We're safe. You idiot. You scared me." "Sorry," he grunted, a shadow of a smile playing on his lips. "Wasn't my intention." He recovered with the same relentless, stubborn determination he did everything else. He was discharged 5 days later, against his doctor's orders. It was raining, a cold, miserable November drizzle. He was in a wheelchair, Marco pushing him, Olivia holding an umbrella over his head. When they got to the car, Marco moved to help him, but Dominic held up a hand. I can do it." He used his good arm to grip the car door, and with a low, pain-filled grunt, he pulled himself to his feet. He stood unsteadily, his face pale and tight with pain. He and Olivia were under the small umbrella, the rain drumming against it, encasing them in a small, private world. He looked at her tear-stained, exhausted, beautiful face. You stayed," he said, his voice rough. "I told you not to leave me," she whispered. And in the middle of the hospital parking lot, surrounded by his men, in the pouring rain, he cupped the back of her head with his good hand and pulled her to him. It was not a passionate kiss. It was a kiss of raw, desperate gratitude. It was a kiss that said, "You're alive, and I'm still here." It was wet and salty with her tears, and it was the most real thing either of them had ever felt. That night, back in the apartment, life resumed, but it was irrevocably changed. Jamie was asleep. The apartment was quiet. Dominic was resting on the sofa, his arm in a sling, his face etched with pain he refused to acknowledge. Olivia had lit candles, the way he had for her. Turning off the harsh overhead lights, the room was soft, golden, and warm. She brought him his medication and a glass of water. He took it, his fingers brushing hers. You don't have to wait on me, Olivia." "I know," she said, sitting on the coffee table in front of him. "I want to—" They sat in the quiet, the rain lashing against the windows. He was alive. They were safe. Trevor was gone. "Dominic," she said, her voice soft. She took his hand, the large, warm, uninjured one. "When you were in the hospital, I was so afraid." "I know." "No," she said, meeting his gaze. "I was afraid of losing you. All this time, I've been so terrified. Of Trevor, of the world, of you. Of what it meant to care about you." She tightened her grip on his hand, her heart, for the first time, feeling not heavy, but full. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. "For the first time in my entire life, I'm not afraid to love someone. I love you, Dominic." He stared at her, the pain in his eyes eclipsed by a raw, profound emotion. He had built an empire on fear. He had controlled his world through it, and this woman, this small, brave, stubborn woman, had just disarmed him completely. He lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. "I love you, Olivia." Later that night, when she was finally asleep in the master bedroom, her body curled against his good side, Dominic lay awake. He listened to her soft, steady breathing. He felt the warmth of her, the reality of her. He had won the war. He had eliminated Trevor. He had crushed the traitors in his own family. He was, once again, the unassailable king of Crestwood. And he realized, with a clarity that was as sharp as the pain in his shoulder, that he didn't want it. He had just been given his life back. He was not going to spend it waiting for the next knife, the next car bomb. He had spent his life building a fortress. And now, he had someone inside it with him. He had a family. He carefully, quietly, picked up his phone from the nightstand. He scrolled to a number in his contacts, one with no name, just a string of digits, a Swiss number. He typed a simple, one-line message. "Begin the liquidation. Phase 1, I'm coming out." He hit send. He put the phone down, and as he lay in the dark, he began to prepare. He was planning to leave the Mafia life behind, for her, for Jamie. He was, at last, choosing both love and safety. The peace was a fragile, high-tensile wire, stretched taut over their new life. Dominic's silent war had concluded. His enemies within the family were broken, exiled, or silent. Sal and Vieri were ghosts, their power dismantled, their operations absorbed by Dominic's loyalists. The victory was total. Trevor Hayes was a different kind of problem. He was buried deep in the Crestwood Penitentiary, awaiting a trial that was a mere formality. His parental rights were gone. His name was a fading stain. But a rabid dog, even in a cage, has one last bite. From a contraband cell phone, bought with the last of his favors, Trevor made his final, pathetic move. He called 2 low-life criminals he had run with years ago, men who specialized in home invasion, men dumber and more brutal than Weasel. He had no money to offer, only a lie. He told them about the apartment, a penthouse, filled with cash, jewelry, and art. He told them the owner was a mafia boss, but he was wounded, weak, laid up in a hospital. And the woman was alone with her kid, an easy score. He gave them the address, the codes he'd wheedled out of a corrupt doorman he knew from another lifetime. He just wanted them to scare her, take everything, and, he whispered, put the kid in the hospital, make her pay. It was the spiteful, useless act of a man who had nothing left but his own venom. It happened on a Tuesday night. Dominic, nearly fully recovered but for a lingering ache in his shoulder, was at a final late-night meeting. He was liquidating his last, most volatile assets, a meeting that had dragged on for hours. Olivia was alone. Jamie was fast asleep in his blue room. The city glittered below, a silent, jeweled blanket. She was in the kitchen, drinking the tea Dominic had bought her, finally reading a book she had been trying to start for weeks. She was, for the first time, breathing. The sound was not loud. It was a faint click from the private elevator's foyer, not the smooth electronic hum of the elevator arriving. A different sound, the sound of a lock being picked. She froze. The building's doorman, the one Trevor knew, had been replaced weeks ago by one of Dominic's men, but the two thugs had used the service entrance, the codes Trevor had given them working just long enough to get them to her floor. She heard a whisper, a man's voice, low and rough. Her blood turned to ice. She didn't scream. She didn't run. All the years of terror had honed her, not into a victim but into a survivor. She moved, silent as a shadow, down the hall to Jamie's room. She locked his door from the outside, a small, desperate prayer that it would hold. Then she ran back to the kitchen and grabbed her phone, her fingers flying, dialing Dominic's number. As she pressed the phone to her ear, the foyer door opened and two men stepped into the living room. They were not from Dominic's world. They were cheap, strung out, and their eyes were wide with a greedy, violent energy. One held a crowbar, the other a long, serrated knife. "Well, well," the one with the knife said, a yellow-toothed grin spreading across his face. Trevor was right, just a girl. Dominic's phone buzzed on the mahogany table in front of him. He was concluding the meeting. "It's done," he was saying to his lawyer. "The funds are transferred." He saw her name, and he picked it up. "Olivia, what's wrong?" He heard only her voice, high and thin with a terror he had not heard since Trevor's days. "Dominic," she whispered, and then the line was filled with a man's voice. "Shut up and put the phone down, lady. Where's the safe?" Dominic was on his feet before the sentence was finished. The transformation was instantaneous. The calm, new man vanished, replaced by the predator. "Marco," he roared, bursting from the room. "The apartment! Now! Go! Go!" He didn't wait for his own men. He ran, his hand inside his jacket, gripping the cold, hard steel of the pistol he had started carrying again. He sprinted to his car, his shoulders screaming in protest, a pain he didn't even register. "Stay on the line, Olivia," he commanded, his voice a low, cold vibration as the car's engine roared to life. "Stay on the line. I am coming." "Oh, put the phone down," the man with the knife screamed at her. He lunged, and Olivia threw the phone. It skittered across the marble floor, the line still open. Dominic, tearing through the empty city streets at 100 miles an hour, heard her scream. He heard the man's voice. "Where's the kid? Trevor said there was a kid." That was when Dominic broke every law of man in physics. He drove the Mercedes over the median, down a one-way street, his horn a single, blaring note of pure, unadulterated rage. He was only 2 minutes away. In the apartment, Olivia grabbed the heavy, cast-iron skillet from the stove, the one he had cooked pasta in. "Leave him alone," she screamed. "There's no money here. Get out." "He said the kid," the man with the crowbar snarled, and he took a step toward the hallway, toward Jamie's room. "No," Olivia shrieked, and she swung the skillet with all her strength. She caught him on the side of the head. The sound was a dull, sickening thud. The man roared in pain, dropping the crowbar, his hand flying to his ear. The man with the knife turned on her. "You stupid d—" The private elevator doors hissed open. Both men froze. Dominic stood there. He was not wearing a coat. He was in his shirt sleeves, his arm in a black sling, but in his right hand he held a black pistol, and his face was a mask of such cold, absolute fury that it was more terrifying than any weapon. "You," Dominic said, his voice a quiet, lethal rumble, "should not have come here." The man with the injured ear, in a fit of pained, stupid rage, grabbed the crowbar and charged. "I'll kill you!" The sound of the gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. It was not a shootout. It was an execution. Dominic did not flinch. He fired once. The man with the crowbar collapsed, a neat, dark hole in his chest. The man with the knife stared at his fallen partner, then at Dominic. His bravado was gone. He dropped the knife. It clattered on the floor. Please, man," he stammered, his hands shooting up. We were just, Trevor said. We didn't, please." Dominic walked forward, his gun still raised, his eyes like chips of ice. He kicked the knife away, his gaze never leaving the man's face. "Who sent you?" he demanded. Trevor Hayes from the jail. He said to hurt the kid. Please, God." Dominic's face tightened. He pressed the barrel of the gun under the man's chin, forcing his head back. "Dominic, no!" Olivia's voice. He had forgotten, for one lethal second, that she was there. He looked at her. She was huddled by the kitchen counter, pale as death, shaking but alive, unharmed. He turned his gaze back to the terrified man. He lowered the gun. He pressed the silent alarm under the main desk, the one that went directly to his security team in the lobby, and to his lawyer. "You'll live," Dominic whispered, his voice raw. "You'll live, and you will testify. You will tell the police, the judge, and anyone who will listen, exactly what Trevor Hayes hired you to do. You will bury him, or I will bury you." When the police arrived, summoned by a home invasion call from the lobby's security, they found a scene that was almost comically clean. One man was dead, the other was zip-tied, whimpering. Dominic Romano, the owner of the apartment, was standing with his arm around a shaking Olivia Monroe, his own registered firearm on the table. Arthur Feldman, his lawyer, was already there, his briefcase open, producing security camera footage from the lobby showing the men breaking in. It was a textbook case of self-defense, clean, simple, and over in an hour. When they were finally, blessedly alone, the sun a weak, gray promise in the east, Olivia's legs gave out. Dominic, his sling now stained with a small patch of blood from where he had torn his healing stitches, caught her with his good arm. She clung to him, her face pressed into his chest, her entire body shaking in the aftermath. I thought... Shh, he said, holding her. It's over. It's really over. You're bleeding, she whispered, pulling back, her hands flying to the dark stain on his sling. He hurt you. Oh, God. Don't you dare, she sobbed, her hands gripping his shirt. Don't you dare die on me, Dominic. Don't you dare. He looked at her, at the fierce, terrified love in her eyes. He kissed her forehead. I'm not going anywhere. I promise you. But his promise was about to be tested. The incident at the penthouse was the last straw. A body, police, news vans. It was exactly the kind of noise the Mafia Council existed to avoid. Vieri, his influence diminished but not gone, called a meeting. It was held in the private dining room at Vesuvio's, the one in the mezzanine. Dominic sat at the head of the table, his arm in a fresh sling, his face impassive. You have become a liability, Dominic, Vieri said, his voice a dry rasp. We have tolerated your distraction. We tolerated the war you brought to our doorstep. But this, a dead man in your living room, police at your private residence. You have brought the light to our world. He was a home invader, Dominic said, his voice flat. It was self-defense. It was a mess. Sal's replacement, a younger, harder man named Rocco, slammed his hand on the table. A mess she brought, first the ex, now this. The entire city is watching you, which means they are watching us. The woman is a problem, Vieri said, his old eyes cold. She has made you weak. She has made me rich, Dominic countered, his voice dropping to a dangerous low. My businesses have never been more profitable. Your operations, he nodded at Rocco, are clean for the first time in a decade. We are not accountants. Dominic, we are a family, Vieri said, and the family demands loyalty. This attachment, it is a sickness. It's time to choose. Her or this, the woman or your empire. You cannot have both. The room was silent. Every man watched him. This was the moment. Dominic looked at their faces. He saw greed, fear, and a hunger for his position. He saw the life he had been born into, the one he had mastered. He saw the cold, empty power he had wielded for 15 years. Then he thought of Olivia, her face pale, swinging a cast-iron skillet to protect her son. He thought of Jamie's laugh as he ran on the rooftop garden. He thought of waking up in the morning, his body tangled with hers, feeling safe. He had already made his choice, weeks ago, in a hospital bed. Dominic stood up, slowly. He was the king, and he would abdicate like one. "You're right," he said, his voice resonating in the quiet room. "A choice must be made." He looked at Marco, his most loyal, his most trusted, Marco, who was standing by the door, his face impassive, but his eyes knowing. "The empire," Dominic said, "is yours. Marco, run it, clean it, or run it into the ground. I don't care." He unfastened his watch, a heavy gold timepiece his father had given him, the symbol of his position. He slid it across the polished table. It spun, coming to a stop in front of a stunned Rocco. "The chair is empty," Dominic said. "Fight over it. I'm done." He turned, his back to them, and walked out of the mezzanine, out of the restaurant, and out of the life he had always known. He got into a car, not his Mercedes, but a simple black town car, and was driven to the airport. He disappeared from Crestwood for 4 weeks. For Olivia, it was agony. One moment, he was her protector, the man who had bled for her. The next, he was gone. Marco had come to the apartment, his face grim. "He's safe, Miss Monroe." He had business. He had to step away, to end it, for good. Did he choose them?" she whispered, her heart breaking. "Did he choose the empire?" "He chose you," Marco said, his voice soft. "He just needs time to make sure the choice sticks. Stay here. You're safe. The apartment is yours. Everything and is yours." She was devastated. She was adrift in the beautiful penthouse, haunted by his absence. But she was, as Marco promised, safe. Trevor was sentenced to 25 years to life, the testimony of the man Dominic had spared sealing his fate. The city was quiet. Olivia, who had survived worse, did what she always did. She kept moving forward. She enrolled Jamie in the local elementary school, a beautiful brick and ivy building that was one of the best in the state. She walked him to school every morning. She made him dinner. She read him stories. She tended the small rooftop garden. She found a routine. Life was good. It was stable. It was everything she had ever wanted for her son. It was just empty. She missed him. She missed his quiet presence, his dry humor, the way he looked at her, the sheer, solid safety of his arms. One evening, 6 weeks after he had vanished, she was in the kitchen. She was cooking pasta, the simple garlic and oil recipe he had taught her. Jamie was in his room doing homework. The apartment was quiet. She heard a sound, the soft, familiar click of a key in the private elevator's lock. Her heart stopped. She dropped the wooden spoon. The elevator doors hissed open. He was standing there. He was not the man who had left. The mafia boss was gone. He was wearing simple, dark trousers, a soft gray cashmere sweater, and a light jacket. His arm was out of the sling, though he favored it slightly. His face was calm. The lines of stress around his eyes were gone. The heavy, dangerous weight he had carried on his shoulders had vanished. He was just Dominic. You're here?" she whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "I'm here," he said. He walked toward her, his eyes never leaving hers. He looked thinner but stronger. "I'm sorry it took so long. It's complicated. Leaving a job." You left." "I did," he said. He stopped in front of her, in the middle of the kitchen, the room that had become the heart of their home. It's all clean. The money is just money now. The businesses are just businesses. It's done. She looked at him, tears welling in her eyes, blurring his face. I thought you chose them. I chose you, he said, his voice rough. I've been choosing you since I saw you in the restaurant, trying to pay a bill with your last $64. He reached into his jacket pocket. He didn't pull out a gun. He pulled out a small, velvet box. He didn't get on one knee. That wasn't his style. He just stood there, in her kitchen, and opened the box. Inside was a ring. It was not a huge, gaudy diamond. It was a simple, elegant square-cut diamond, flanked by 2 deep blue sapphires. It was a ring that said, forever, not I own you. I don't, he started, and his voice, the voice that had commanded armies and brought a city to its knees, was thick with an emotion she had never heard. I don't know how to do this. I've only ever taken things. Olivia, I don't know how to ask. Then don't ask, she whispered, her tears now streaming down her face. I love you, he said, his voice a raw promise. I want to wake up with you and Jamie every morning. I want to be the man who deserves you. I want to give you a life where you never have to look over your shoulder again. Will you marry me, Olivia Monroe? She didn't answer. She lunged forward, her arms wrapping around his neck, and she kissed him. It was a kiss of such profound, desperate, joyful relief that it left them both breathless. It was a kiss that tasted of salt and pasta and home. She pulled back, her forehead resting against his, her hands clutching his sweater. I never stopped waiting for you, she whispered. He slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. The final scene was not a climax, it was a beginning. It was a bright, cold Monday morning. The city was bustling, alive with the sound of traffic and people heading to work. Jamie, in his new school uniform, a red backpack on his shoulders, was holding a book about dinosaurs, talking a mile a minute. And so the T-Rex, he wasn't really a hunter, he was a scavenger. Mr. D, that means he ate stuff that was already dead. That's a smart way to live, so Dominic said, his voice serious. Less work, more reward. Dominic was on Jamie's right. He was wearing jeans, boots, and the same warm jacket from the night he returned. He was holding Jamie's hand. On Jamie's left, Olivia was holding his other hand. Her hair was down, shining in the morning light, and the sapphire ring on her finger flashed as she moved. They were a family. They walked through the streets of Crestwood. The city had not forgotten him. As they passed, men in suits stopped, their conversations dying. Shop owners paused, sweeping their walks. The city held its breath. They saw the feared mafia boss, Dominic Romano, but he was not in a black car. He was not flanked by guards. He was holding a woman's hand, and he was walking a little boy to school. No one dared approach. No one made a sound, the quiet, invisible wall of his power. The power he had tried to leave behind was still there. But it was no longer a weapon. It was a shield. He was the quiet protector. And he was, finally, home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. We truly hope you enjoyed the journey of Olivia and Dominic. We would love to know where in the world you're listening from, so please drop a comment and let us know. If you love stories like this, please consider subscribing to our channel, Mafia Romance Stories, for more content just like it. And finally, we'd love to hear your thoughts on the story. What was your favorite part? What did you think of the ending? Share your thoughts with us in English in the comments below. Thank you again for joining us.